Hello, my name is Tim Goudswaard, a consultant at FT Strategies, the specialist consultancy from the Financial Times. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Angela Mackay, the Chief Commercial Officer and Managing Director Asia Pacific at the FT, and we'll be discussing revenue diversification. Thanks a lot for being here, Angela.
My pleasure.
Really, you've been at the FT for over 20 years. You've had a front row seat at almost every revenue diversification play the FT has made. I mean, the build out of FT Live, the acquisition of AlphaGrid, and FT Studio, Longitude as well, the geographical expansion into Asia. Take us to the start of that journey. What did the FT look like 20 years ago, and how did the revenue mix really evolve over time?
Well, 20 years ago, of course, we had completely different ownership. We had lived in a very different environment. 20 years ago, we could count our competitors on two hands. Now we need 200 hands to be able to count how many people are working and operating inside our space, our news media space, and the competition for readership time, the competition for sponsorship and advertising dollars, just a hugely complex universe when before we were just dealing with a little solar system. So when I joined the FT, it was in the editorial team in Hong Kong. And then after a few years, our CEO for 19 years, John Ridding, who was the Asia editor, was appointed to that CEO role, and I moved over to the commercial side with him, which was fantastically interesting because instead of writing about business, I was trying to run a business, probably not that well to start off with, but you soon get the hang of it or you're out the door. So for us, at that stage, we were part of the Pearson group. And Pearson used to have a very, very strange collection of disassociated assets. So not only do they have Penguin, they had the FT, they also had a 50% stake in The Economist, they owned Madame Tussauds, Chateau Lafite, Wedgwood, all sorts of things. Now, was that, to use some of the words that you were using before, is that a diversification strategy, or was that a collection of beautiful, shiny toys? And I think that they were the latter, but all good brands, right? And some of them throw off a lot of cash, and some of them were just nice to haves. So enter the real world, enter World Wide Web, enter changes in technology, where suddenly we're surrounded by new media, and we were being called old media, legacy media. We very quickly realised, we all have to transform. So we're all new media now. And John Ridding was really the first to come to grips with people paying for online content. People used to say to John and to me and to others at the FT, the internet wants to be free. Well, I don't think the internet wants anything, actually. I think what the internet wants is to be populated with a lot of fantastic content. And the way to get that happening is for people to pay. So we introduced the metered model, which provided a funnel to get readers in. After a certain number of stories, they were asked to register. After another few stories, they were asked to buy either a premium or a standard subscription. So for me, that was the pivotal point. And you either bought into that or you thought we were going, we were crazy. But I definitely bought into that one. And then we started to think about, what money are we leaving on the table here? We looked around at aggregators, and there was LexisNexis and Factiva and others who stood between us and our readers. So people would look up a story, they'd buy it through Factiva, and we'd get a fraction of the money, but none of the information. And that's when we realised, we need first-party data. We need to have the information that arms us with the facts that make us a compelling purchase, a place for investors like advertisers or sponsors to put their money. So we disintermediated the intermediaries and said to Factiva and LexisNexis, we're no longer being paid for through you. And then we laboriously, over several years, set up a B2B subscription business, now called FT Pro. And that's been fantastic because that has, that's a great renewable business that's not so exposed to the vicissitudes of the advertising cycle. So you can see there's a pattern here. We want people to pay. We want people to pay a reasonable amount of money. In fact, I want people to pay a lot of money for what we do, because what we do costs a lot of money to produce. 700 journalists in that global newsroom, and they all need nurturing, feeding. They need to travel. They need to go and have the time to hunt stories, to make analysis. So it's a really important purpose and mission for all of us. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea about just being on the front foot, getting off the back foot. Rather than having new media happen to us, we decided that we were going to go and join new media and play with them as an equal.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that is what really sets the FT apart as well. I mean, there's a few things that the rest of the industry hasn't really caught up with yet, and there's a couple of unique propositions that the FT has as well. I mean, I just mentioned a few as well with FT Live. We have a massive events business, but we also have FT Studio, FT Longitude, a thought leadership arm. Has there been a through line in terms of the strategic choices made to really start or explore these different paths, or was it more just following where the market, where the audience is going?
A bit of both, I think. I mean, I mentioned to you that we wanted to not be vulnerable to the advertising cycle, because up until about 15 years ago, 70%, 75% of our revenues came through advertising, mostly print and then increasingly digital. By the way, this year is the first year where our digital advertising is far exceeding our print advertising, which is good and bad because I love them both succeeding. Yes. So for us, it is about a hedge. It's about hedging against down cycles in other parts of the business. Events are really interesting because it is a way of people convening, networking, but also I like events where you can build them into the workflow. The same way as I like to think that we can build our content into people's workflow. For me, I don't want people just to go to an event to drink cocktails and network. I want them to learn something. I want them to do a deal. I want them to feel that they have to be there because this is an agenda setting and a deal making summit, event, conference, and they must go there, and they must go there every year. Unfortunately, we have a lot of properties that do precisely that. And we made an acquisition last year of a company called Inviso, which was the rump of Euromoney. It's a fixed interest events business with 2 or 3 Maypole events with thousands of people go in Barcelona and in Miami, 7,000 people in Miami, 4,000 people in Barcelona, and they're going there and it's a battery farm of meetings. They're going there and they're writing half the business that they do in that single financial year. So that's the sweet spot, I think. The FT should be firmly embedded in people's work, professional life. And I think that's how we get relevance, and that's how we stay front of mind and people realise the value that we can provide them.
I mean, that's why I think FT Live also really stands out as a B2B events business, because most events business that you see in the industry, you see rely heavily, lean a lot on ticket revenue, whereas for FT Live, that's a lot of sponsorship revenue. Can you tell us a bit more about why that mix of a lot of sponsorship revenue compared to ticket revenue works so well for the FT?
Well, actually, it's quite a lot of delegate revenue too. You've got to have both, right? Again, you've got to be able to bring those people, bring the audience in. It's cyclical. You've got to have a fabulous audience in order for sponsors to pay very high prices. So same way with advertising. You need to have that demographic, that audience that appeals to an advertiser, and that's why we charge ridiculously high rates for our online advertising, and also not pretty much for our print advertising, because we have the audience they want to capture. But for me, delegate revenue has been growing. I haven't been ignoring it at all. It's trebled over the last, since the beginning of COVID. Obviously, we had a lovely big dip there and went online, which was fantastic because suddenly we were reaching tens of thousands of people at one event as opposed to 1,000 people at one event. So I think that having that revenue mix is super important. And of course, coming back to COVID, I mean, it was a terrible blight on the world, but it did force us all to think differently. And I remember I was in London and was literally trying to catch the last plane out of Heathrow to get back to Hong Kong. And I said, right, cancel everything and let's invest in online. So within a month, we had completely pivoted to an online business, charging the same amount of money for sponsorship. Different rate for delegates because we don't have any of the hard costs around that. But it meant that our profitability came back very quickly because our costs were so low. But we were still obtaining the same level of sponsorship and reaching many, many, many more eyeballs because people had not much to do except sit behind their computer and watch stuff.
Yes. Yeah, you and me both as well. I would actually like to touch on maybe what you mentioned earlier is the high price for sponsorship for FT Live. I mean, sponsors really pay a premium to be associated with the FT brand, but then the FT brand in itself also leans on editorial independence. That's what we're known for. And for executives thinking about this diversification play, starting an events business, this is what we've heard as well, a major concern. Where do you draw the line between editorial independence and sponsorship dollars, basically?
Well, I think that there are pink events and there are not pink events. So we have the bulk of our portfolio is independent journalism live on a stage or on a screen. I think that people want to come to an FT event because they fear that they believe they're going to hear views that are without fear and without favour, the same as if they were reading our website or our newspaper. So we certainly don't want to dumb down our brand. That would be nuts. So we are very clear with our sponsors that you need to be prepared for some hard questions. If your executives are on stage, you need to be prepared to hear maybe not totally positive information about your sector if it comes up in the course of discussion. So people are not ambushed. People know what they're getting into, and they clearly don't mind because the business has been growing very, very well. We do have other events called partner events, which are usually single sponsor events, smaller audience and very targeted. And we will work with that sponsor on the topic to make sure that we cover some themes that they're interested in. But at the same time, we have independent journalists do the moderation. So you still have to be ready to be bold or googly. Yeah.
You were right at the start when FT Live was basically just beginning. And for those who are viewing or listening, can you tell us a bit more about what is really needed if you are a legacy publication or a new media publisher? What capabilities are really needed to basically start an events business at scale? Like, is there anything that people really shouldn't underestimate that's really essential here?
Well, what's essential is the quality of the content underpinning everything you do. There's been plenty of examples over the last few years where companies have set up as paid-for news outlets, I can name a couple, and have quickly transformed into events businesses because, quite frankly, selling subscriptions when you're coming from a place of anonymity is super hard. I think that it's probably easier to sell events because you can probably attract a few big names that then attract other interesting people into the audience. But events are hard, and you have to be very, very agile. You have to be prepared to review the portfolio all the time. You know, it's like keep, chuck, grow, that sort of thing. You can't be in any way confident that what worked last year is going to work this year. You have to constantly interrogate your business. So we do a lot of review, constant review, and that's worked very well for us, because even if something is very topical, if you can't get support for it, you really do have to be quite brutal and say, well, I know this is an interesting topic, but there's no one prepared to invest in it. Like, for example, the future of media is a wonderfully interesting topic. It's my existential crisis, right? But it's very hard to find anyone to pay sponsorship to listen to that. So we might do that anyway as a public interest, the FT.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being so candid with everything FT Live. There's one more thing that we've seen a lot in the industry, and a lot of publications that we've worked with are always wondering is, when you start a new business, there's always the risk of competing for the same clients, basically the concept of cannibalization. How does the FT really handle this trade-off, basically, where there's a risk of, let's say FT Longitude as an example, there might be a risk of people not reading the FT because they get enough out of the thought leadership of FT Longitude.
That just means we're not selling properly, because frankly, that's the whole beauty of it. The whole beauty of it is that the house has many rooms, and you need to appreciate the full joy of the FT universe. Frankly, you know, the newspaper's great, the website is great, HTSI is fantastic. Our specialist titles, such as The Banker, are world class. We have a world class research arm in Longitude. We have a global events business in FT Live. We have a wonderful consultancy in FT Strategies. So, you know, you need many arrows in your thing, in your kit, because that's what like I said, you need to have hedges against economic downturn or people's tastes changing. There's loads of different forces acting on it. But for us, I think cannibalization is something that we don't really worry about that much, because unless we're starting something brand new that is in the middle of something, then we have to experiment with that. But from my point of view, I would rather say to someone, here, you've got some research. What about an event that then presents this research to the audience that you're seeking? And why don't you amplify that by taking out an advertising campaign in print or online? And we can position your ad near content that you think is interesting to your audience and your potential customers. I mean, if you're thoughtful, it's like a delicious chain, and you can follow it, hopefully, to a pot of gold at the end.
That's amazing. So really getting people into the FT universe. I would love to end on a bit of a high note, a generalization, maybe a key takeaway. You've seen it all at the FT in terms of revenue diversification. If a publisher is listening and is keen to set out on their diversification journey, what would be your main takeaway for them? What is something they should really think about before they embark on this?
A media company.
A media company.
Well, I'm going to assume they have high quality content. Right?
Let's hope.
To me, that is the foundation. That's the maypole we dance around. So it's deploying that content in order to make the audience as engaged as possible. So it's making sure you can get your content where your audience is, whether that is live at an event, whether that is via LinkedIn, or however you want to get people's eyeballs or grab engagement. You need to be prepared and very, very flexible and silo busting, I think, in order to make sure that you don't ignore new ways of getting people's attention and also their dollars as they buy a subscription. So I think that it's important to be bold about charging. You know, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, a lot of people were critical about the FT because the internet wants to be free. No, it doesn't. I think being bold and making sure that you have a wonderful online proposition, that's got to be mobile these days, and video, audio. I just think that you have to be prepared to embrace as many ways of presenting your content through as many channels as possible, quality channels as possible. And of course, be always looking for the new audience. You know, you've got to constantly be putting more people on the top of that funnel. And nowadays, I think it's getting very, very hard to see how we can, well, not just us, but everybody, how we're going to get Gen Z to engage with our content, and not just engage, but become addicted to it the same way as many of our customary readers are.
I mean, it's the $1 million question.
It's a $1 million question, and I certainly wouldn't be revealing it, the answer, in this interview.
Of course. All right, Angela, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Lovely to meet you. Thank
you. Likewise.
Take care.